Doop. Dooby doop. Doop. Dooby doop. Dooby doop. Doop. Dooby doop. I'm not late, you are. Do I have audio? I don't hear me. Oh, I hear my coughing. Okay. What else is coming on right now? Okay. To cut all background stuff because I already crashed once today and I don't want to do it again. I'm going to bookmark the site I was working on. Over here. Sing. Yeah, I'll do the path to affiliate this time around. Okay, well, nothing. So you retweeting my tweets. I'll do the Discord stuff. People on Discord know that I'm discordant. If they didn't, I would know that. I've been discordant for some time in my life. Hmm. Okay, I did my Discord posts. Okay, close this out. Close this out. over here and say, "What up, chat?" Okay. How's everyone doing tonight? I apologize, I'm munching popcorn. I forgot to eat dinner. I'm a model. Oh, come on. Now it says me staring at the ceiling. Damn it. Maybe. Ah, good. Sort of back. Okay. So have you ever seen me like looking up so much? It's because I'm trying to look at my screen. I don't really need to do music or something. So hope you Cubs had a good week. No, you Cubs that are here. I'm almost done with popcorn. Maybe. Model short. Yeah. Damn it. It doesn't like the light. I have the light behind me apparently. There's a Leo. Never got a notification it was here. I'm really trying to finish off the popcorn as fast as I can. Sorry. How you doing? Pretty sure I got you listed on my follows, so. Yeah, I think I followed from your link last time. Double check your setup. Let's see. Yep, I got you on follow, so. Yeah, the Furry Power 69 is pretty easy to recognize. Okay, app. Why are you doing this to my face again? I'm staring at a bug on the ceiling. Okay, I'm going to switch apps real quick. You're going to go. Where are you going to go? Yeah, they tend to be a pain in the ass sometimes. I guess if you really wanted to, you could force them to listen to me read stories. on, VTube Studio. What the hell? Well, 15. I guess I gotta do. Switch to my reading screen. Yep. Let's see. Yeah, I'm reading. Oh, excuse me. Reading regular fairy tales tonight. Man. Of course, also drinking blood orange soda, so that's probably not helping much. This tiny trip to the fairies. Okay. And I can never decide if I want to use this one or this one. No, I didn't change the book on this one. Yeah, this book. Just considering how my model is reacting, PNG may be the better option. So, I guess I will get into the book. Because that's what I'm here for. So, the first story I have tonight, Cubs, is Tiny's Trip to the Fairies. I don't recognize this one, so it'll be interesting. There once was a woman who had no children. She wanted a little girl more than she ever wanted anything. She did not know where she could get one. Finally, she went to an old witch and said, "I do so want a little child. Will you tell me where I can get one?" "Oh, that is easy," said the old witch. "Here is a grain of corn for you. It is not at all the same kind that grows in your feet. It is not the kind of corn that chickens eat. Plant it in a flower pot, and you will see what will happen." "Thank you, oh thank you," said the woman. She hurried home and planted the corn. At once a large, beautiful plant sprang up. It had a flower that looked just like a tulip, but the petals were tightly shut, just as if they were still in the bud. "That is a lovely flower," said the woman. She kissed the pretty flower, yellow leaves. As she did this, the flower opened. Right in the middle of the flower was a little girl. A little green stool sat the tiny little girl. I swear I have not been drinking. She was not over an inch tall. She was so lovely that it almost took the woman's breath away. Because she was very small, the woman called her Tiny. Good. The woman made Tiny a bed out of a walnut shell. Tiny lay on soft rose leaves, and a tulip leaf covered her. In this pretty little bed she slept at nights, but all day she played. She played on a large table. In the middle of this table was a plate filled with water. In the water were some roses. A large leaf dropped from one of the roses. It floated about on the water. This was Tiny's boat. She sat on it and sailed from one side of the plate to the other. She pushed the boat along with 2 white horsehairs. It was a pretty sight to see Tiny on the leaf in the water. Tiny could sing, too. Her voice was soft, beautiful. One night she lay in her pretty bed. There was a broken place in the window near her. A great ugly toad hopped in through the broken place. Oh, how ugly that great toad was. Racist. It hopped right down on the table where Tiny lay fast asleep under the red tulip leaf. "Here's a lovely wife for my son," said the toad. She picked up the walnut shell where Tiny slept and hopped away with it. He went through the broken glass window. He went down into the garden. The toad lived with his son there on the muddy bank of the stream. The toad's son was cold, wet. He was ugly, just as his father was. Oaks, oaks. That was all the young toad had to say when he saw the lovely little girl in the walnut shell. "Do not talk so loud, or you will wake her," said the old toad. "She might get away, for she is as light as a feather. We will put her on one of the wide lily leaves out in the stream. It will be just like an island to her. She is so small and light. She won't be able to run away from her while we go get a room ready for her down under the mud." Many water lilies grew in the stream. Their wide green leaves looked as if they were floating on the water. The old toad swam out to the leaf which was on the farthest away from the bank. On this leaf, the old toad placed the walnut shell. In this shell lay Tiny. She was asleep. Poor little Tiny woke up early in the morning. When she saw where she was, she began to cry. Water was on all sides of her. She could not reach the land anywhere. The old toad sat in the mud. He was putting grass and yellow water lily leaves in his home down under the mud. He wanted to make it very nice for his new daughter. The old toad and his son swam out to the leaf where Tiny stood. They wanted to get her pretty bed. They wanted to put it in the room they had made for her before they took her there. The old toad made a deep bow in the water before her. He said, "This is my son. He is to be your husband. You are to live together down in the mud." "Whoops, whoops," was all that the other son could say. The 2 toads took the little bed and swam away with it. Tiny sat alone on the green leaf and cried because she did not want to live with the ugly old toad. She did not want this dreadful son for her husband. A little fish swam about in the water, heard what the old toad said. They stuck their heads up out of the water in order to see the little girl. When they saw her, they were delighted with her. They were sorry to think that she had to go down and live with the ugly toads. No, that should never happen. They swam together around and about the green leaf. They gnawed at it with their teeth till it floated away down the stream. They carried Tiny away where the toads could not follow her. Tiny sailed past place after place. The little birds in the bushes saw her. They sang out, "What a lovely little maid!" On the leaf, which the stream she sat on floated far downstream. A pretty little white butterfly floated round and around her. At last it came to rest on the leaf. It had taken quite a liking to Tiny. Tiny was happy now. The toads could not reach her. She was sailing through lovely places. The sun shone on the water, and it looked like shining gold. She took off her ribbon and tied one end around the butterfly. The other end she fastened to the leaf. She went sailing faster and faster down the stream. At this moment, a large beetle came flying along. He saw Tiny and flew down toward her. He fixed his claw around her small body and flew off with her. Up into a tree he flew. Green Leaf went on floating down the stream. The butterfly flew with it, for he was tied. He could not get loose. Tiny was left alone. How frightened little Tiny was when the beetle carried her up into the tree. Most of all, she was worried about the pretty little white butterfly that she had fastened to the leaf. If he could not get loose, he would starve to death. Yeah. But the beetle cared nothing for that. He placed Tiny on the largest leaf in the tree. He fed her with honey from the flowers, said that she was lovely, even though she was not a bit like an insect. Soon the other beetles in the tree came to visit them. They looked at Tiny, and the ladies shook their heads. They said, "Ugly she is. She only has 2 legs." Tiny really was very pretty, but the beetles did not think so. The large beetle who had caught her had thought she was pretty. Now when he heard what the others thought about her, he changed his mind. He too began to believe she was ugly. He would have nothing to do with her. She could go wherever she liked. He flew down from the tree with the little girl and placed her on a flower. There she cried because she was so ugly that the beetles would have nothing to do with her. She really was more beautiful than anything you ever saw. She was as lovely as soft velvet. Poor Tiny lived all the summer alone in the wood. She made a bed for herself out of grass. She hung it under a large leaf so that she would not be out in the way. She got honey from the flowers for her food. Her drink was the dew which lay on the leaves in the mornings. In this way the summer and the autumn passed. At last winter came. All of the birds which used to sing sweetly to her flew away. The large leaf under which she lived had dried up. It had become dead and yellow. Tiny shivered with the cold, for her clothes were thin and old. She was such a small creature, poor Tiny, that it was hard to keep from freezing. Every bit of snow that fell on her was like the whole pail of snow upon one of us. Tiny, remember, was only an inch tall. She wrapped herself in a leaf. That did not warm her very much. She trembled with the cold. A large cornfield was nearby. The corn had long ago been carried away. Nothing was left but the dry stalks which stood up out of the frozen ground. The corn stalks made quite a forest for Tiny to walk about in. One day as she walked along the corn stalks, she shook with cold. She had lost her way. She was tired. Then she came to the door of a field mouse's home. It was a little hole under the ground. The field mouse was warm and cozy there. She had a beautiful kitchen. There was also a whole room filled with corn. Poor Tiny stood just inside the door and begged for a piece of corn. She had nothing to eat for 2 days. "You poor thing," said the field mouse. "Come into my warm room and eat with me." After Tiny had eaten, the field mouse said, "You may stay with me for the winter if you wish. You must, however, keep my house nice and clean. Too, you must tell me stories. I like stories." Tiny did what the old field mouse asked her to do. She was very comfortable in her new home. "Now we shall soon have a visitor," said the field mouse. "My neighbor comes to see me often. He even has a better house than I. His rooms are very large. He wears a black velvet coat. If you could only get him for a husband, you would indeed be lucky. But he can't see. You must tell him the most beautiful stories you know." Tiny did not like this. She would have nothing to say to the neighbor, for he was a mole. He came and paid a visit in his black velvet coat. The field mouse said the mole was very rich and wise. His home was 20 times as large as hers. He knew a great deal, but he did not like the sun or the beautiful flowers. He had never seen them. Tiny had to sing to the mole. Because of her sweet voice, the mole fell in love with her. He did not say anything about it at first. The mole had just made a long tunnel underground. It ran from their house to his. He told the field mouse and Tiny that they might walk in it any time they wished. He told them not to be afraid of the dead bird lying in the tunnel. The bird must have died in the beginning of winter. It must have been dead long ago. It was now lying just where the mole had made his tunnel. The mole took his bright light and walked in front of him in the long dark tunnel. When he came to the dead bird, the mole pushed his wide nose through the roof. This made a big hole through which Tiny could see the light. Tiny saw that the bird was a swallow. Its wings were against its sides. Its head and legs were down under its feathers. Tiny thought the poor bird had died of cold. Tiny was sorry for it. She loved all the little birds. They had sung sweetly to her the whole summer. The mole kicked the bird with its short legs and said, "Now we'll pipe no more. It must have been terrible to be born a bird. A bird like that can do nothing but sing. Winter comes, it starves to death." "Yes, that's right," said the field mouse. "What does a bird get for all his singing when cold weather comes?" Tiny did not say anything. When the others turned their backs on the bird, she knelt down and softly patted the bird's head. Then she kissed its closed eyes. Perhaps it was this very bird which sang so sweetly to me in the summer, she thought. How happy the song made me. Dear pretty bird. The mole now closed up the hole which had let the light in, and let Tiny and the mouse into their home. Tiny could not sleep at all that night. She got up out of her bed and made a large, handsome rug of hay. She carried it down and spread it over the dead bird. She laid some soft cotton and wool which she found in the mouse's room close to the bird's sides. It now had a warm bed on the cold ground. "Goodbye, you sweet little bird," said she. "Goodbye, and thank you for your sweet songs through summer." Then all the trees were green, and the sun shone warmly on us. She laid her head down close to the bird's breast. She was surprised at the sound she heard. Something was thumping inside the bird. It was the bird's heart. The bird was not dead. Now that it had been warmed, it began to show signs of life. In the autumn, all swallows fly away to warm countries. If one happens to be late, it feels the cold so much that it falls down like a dead thing. It stays where it falls until snow covers it up. That is how the swallow came to be there. Tina shook with fright. The bird was very, very big beside a little girl who was only 1 inch high. Tiny packed the wool closer around the poor bird, brought an oak leaf which she had used on her bed to cover the bird's head. The next night she came again to the bird. She found it alive, but so weak that it could only open its eyes for a moment to look at Tiny. "Many, many thanks, you sweet child," said the sick swallow to her. "You have warmed me wonderfully. I shall soon be strong enough to fly out to the warm sun again." "Oh," said Tiny, "it is cold outside. It snows and freezes. Stay in your warm bed. I will look after you." Then she brought water to the swollen leaf. When it had drunk, the bird told her how it had a thorn in its wing on the bush. It had not been able to fly as fast as the other swallows, which were going to warm lands. At last it had fallen to the ground. The swallow remembered nothing else and did not know how it had gotten into the tunnel. The bird stayed there all winter. Tiny was good to it and grew very fond of it. She did not tell the mole or the field mouse anything about it. They had not liked the poor swallow. As soon as spring came and the sun warmed the ground, the swallow said goodbye to Tiny. Tiny opened the hole which the mole had made in the roof of the tunnel. The swallow asked Tiny if she would not like to go away. It said that she could sit upon its back and they could fly far away to the green wood. But Tiny knew it would make the kind old field mouse sad if she left like that. "No, I can't," she said. "Goodbye, goodbye then, you kind, pretty girl," said the swallow. It flew out into the sunlight. Tiny looked after the swallow, and her eyes filled with tears. Off the bird flew into the green wood. Tiny was very sad. She was not allowed to go into the warm sunlight. The corn which was planted in the field near the mouse's house grew and grew. It was a thick forest for the poor little girl who was only 1 inch high. "You must work on your clothes so that you may be ready to marry," said the mouse to her. Their neighbor with the black velvet coat had asked Tiny to be his wife. "You shall have both wool and cotton," said the mouse. "You must have clothes when you become the mole's wife." The mouse had paid 4 spiders to spin and weave day and night. The mole had come to see them every evening. He did not like the sun. He was always saying that when summer came to an end, the sun would not shine nearly so warmly. He said that now it burned the ground as hard as a stone. Yes, when summer was over, they would be married. Tiny was not at all pleased. She did not care a bit for the old mole. Each morning and evening she slipped out the door. When the wind blew aside the tops of the cornstalks, she could see the blue sky. She thought how bright and lovely it was out there. She wished that she could see the dear swallow again. It never came back. Perhaps it was a long way off, flying in the beautiful green wood. When autumn came, all of Tiny's clothes were ready. "In 4 weeks you must be married," said the mouse to her. But Tiny cried and said she would not have the old mole for a husband. "Oh," said the mouse, "don't be so silly, or I'll bite you with my sharp teeth. You're going to have a splendid husband. The queen herself doesn't have a coat as nice as beautiful black velvet. His kitchen and his cellar are full. You should be thankful for such a husband." At last came the time for them to be married. The mole had come for Tiny. She was to live deep down under the ground with him. She was never to go out into the warm sunshine, for he could not bear it. The poor child was very unhappy at the thought of saying goodbye to the beautiful sun. While she had been with the mouse, she had at least allowed to look at it from time to time. "Goodbye, you bright sun," she said, and she stretched out her arm towards it. She stepped out of the door. The tall corn had been cut. She threw her small arms around the little red flower growing close by. "Goodbye, goodbye," she said. "Give my love to the dear swallow if you ever see it." At this moment she heard something above her head. She looked up. It was a swallow just passing. As soon as it saw Tiny, it was delighted and flew down to her. She told her how she was going to have the ugly old mole for a husband, and that she was to live down deep under the ground where the sun never shone. She could not help crying. "Cold winter is coming," said the swallow. "I'm going to fly away to a warm land. Will you go with me?" "You must sit on my back. We'll fly away from the mole and his dark cave. We'll fly away far over the mountains to the warm places. The sun shines more brightly than it does here. There it is always summer, and there are many flowers. Do fly away with me, sweet Tiny." "Yes, I will go with you," said Tiny. She got on the bird's back and rested her feet on its wings. She held the swallow around its neck. Away the swallow flew high up in the air above the forests and lakes. It flew high above mountains where the snow never melts. Tiny shivered in the cold air, but she crept under the bird's feathers. She only stuck out her little head to look at the beautiful things beneath her. At last they reached the warm countries. The sun shone brightly. The sky seemed very high, very blue. She could see fruit hanging on the bushes and trees below. She caught the beautiful colors of it all: green, blue, orange, and yellow. She could smell the sweet flowers. She could see beautiful children running and playing with lovely colored butterflies. The swallow flew on and on. The country grew more and more beautiful. Under large green trees on the shores of the blue sea stood a shining white house. Blooming flowers on trailing vines grew along the wide porch. In these vines were many nests, and in one of them a swallow lived. "Here is my house," said the swallow. "But if you will choose one of those beautiful flowers growing down there, I will put you on it. You will live there as happy as you wish." "That would be lovely," she said, clapping her little hands. The swallow flew down and put Tiny on one of the large leaves of the flower she had chosen. What was her surprise to find a little man in the middle of the flower. She could see right through him, just as if he had been made of glass. He had a lovely golden crown upon his head, and the most beautiful bright wings upon his shoulders. He was no bigger than Tiny. He was a little fairy of the flowers. There was a little man or woman like him on almost every flower, but he was the king of them. "How beautiful he is," whispered Tiny to the swallow. The little fairy prince was quite frightened by the swallow. The bird was giant to him, for he was very small. But when he saw Tiny, he was delighted. She was the prettiest girl he had ever seen. He took the little golden crown off his head and placed it on hers. He asked her name and if she would be his wife. Then she would be queen of the flowers. He would certainly make a very different kind of husband from the toad's son, who was very different from the old mole in his black woollen cloak. She told the little king that she would be his wife. Out of every flower stepped a little lady or a little man, so lovely that it was a joy to look at them. Each one brought some lovely gift to Tiny. The best gift of all was a pretty pair of wings. They were fastened to her back so that she could fly from flower to flower. All was delight and happiness with Tiny. But the swallow sat alone in his nest. He sang for them as well as he could, but his heart was heavy. He loved Tiny, and now she had left him. He wished he did not have to part from her. You shall not be called Tiny, said the king of the flowers to her. Here we are all tiny. We will call you May. Goodbye, goodbye, said the swallow. He flew away from the warm countries back to where he had come from. There he had a little nest above for the window where the man lived, wrote this story. There the swallow sang his song to the man, and he has told us this whole story. So, if anyone ever asks you the story of, technically it's Thumbelina, you can say that a little bird told you. Okay. Well, this book is definitely not all Hans Christian Andersen, because the next story in here is Beauty and the Beast. There was once a rich man who had 3 sons and 3 daughters. There's deviation. They lived together and were very happy for many years. Then one day the father lost his money. All his ships were lost at sea. He had nothing left but an old house in the country. He took his children to live in the house. The 3 sons did not like to live in the old house. They quarreled because they had to work in the field. 2 of the girls did not like to live in the old house either. They quarreled just as the boys did. They did not like to work about the house. But the youngest girl, whose name was Beauty, did not quarrel. She worked hard and was always happy and smiling. Yeah. One day the father learned that one of the ships had been found. He went at once to see about it. He had hopes of finding some of his money on the ship. Before he left, he asked each daughter what she wanted him to bring her. Bring me a ring, the oldest girl said. Bring me a fine dress, the next girl said. Beauty did not want to ask for a large present. She knew they needed more things than her father would be able to buy. I want nothing but a red rose, she said. Of course. When the father came to the ship, he found nothing on it. Someone had already taken everything that was any good, and nobody would buy the old ship. The father started back home. He was tired and unhappy. He walked both night and day. On the second night, he lost his way. He took an old path and followed it a long way. At last, he came to a castle. The castle had a light at every window. Maybe I can stay there the rest of the night, he said to himself. The father went to the front door and knocked. No one came, and he knocked again. Then he went to the back door. Still, nobody answered him. He went again to the front door. The door was not locked. He went inside. On the table was a good supper, but nobody seems to be in the house. They sat down at the table and ate supper. In the next room was a bed. The father lay down on the bed and went to sleep. He slept there the rest of the night. In the morning he started home. In the yard he passed a bed of red roses, and he thought of his daughter. He remembered that Beauty had asked for a red rose. He started to pick one of the roses. "Stop!" the voice said. The father looked around and saw an ugly beast coming towards him. "Who are you?" the father asked. "I am the beast," came the reply. "How dare you take my roses? I gave you food. I let you sleep in one of my beds. And then you want to take one of my roses. You shall die for this." The man was truly frightened. "I'm sorry," he said. "I wanted the rose for Beauty. Beauty is my daughter. She is very lovely. She works hard, never quarrels. She is kind and good to everyone. I wanted the rose for her. Please do not take my life." "If you will promise to bring me Beauty here to live with me, I will not kill you," the beast said. "Please do not ask for Beauty," the father said. "She is the best one of my daughters." "If you do not promise to bring her, I will take your life," the beast said. "Then I promise," said the father. "Take the rose to her," the beast told him. "Bring her here in a month. Remember to keep your promise." Beast's voice is cracked in the voice. The father took the rose and went home. "What a beautiful rose!" cried Beauty. "Thank you, father." "That rose cost me much," he said. He told Beauty of his meeting with the beast. He told her of the promise he had made. "That's all right," Beauty said. "You made a promise. We shall keep it." When a month had passed, Beauty went with her father to the castle of the beast. They found the door open and went inside. The table was set for two. Beauty and her father sat down and ate. Then the beast came into the room. "I see you have brought Beauty," the beast said. "She is beautiful. You must go home and leave her here with me. Have no fear. She will be safe." The father told his daughter goodbye and went home. Beauty wandered down the hall and came to a sign over a door. The sign said, "This room is for Beauty." Beauty went into the room. By the window was a beautiful bed. All the things in the room were very fine. On the bed, Beauty found a note. It said, "All your commands will be obeyed. You are the queen of everything in this castle." "I wish for nothing but to see my father," Beauty said to herself. When she looked at her mirror, she saw her father going into his house. Beauty knew that she had gotten her wish, and she was glad. At supper that evening, the beast came to the table. "May I have supper with you?" the beast asked. Beauty was afraid, but she said, "Of course you may." The beast was so ugly that Beauty could hardly look at him. She was afraid of him. "Do you think I'm very, very ugly?" he asked. "Yes," Beauty replied, "but I'm sure you are very kind." When they finished supper, the beast stood up. "Beauty, will you Be my wife? He asked. She was surprised and afraid. No, beast, she said weakly. Well, here's a picture of a bear. The beast said a sad goodnight and left the room. Beauty felt sorry for him. There is something sad about the beast, she said to herself. Old age, feathers were little. For many days, Beauty lived on the house. She saw the beast only at supper time. Each evening, he asked her to be his wife. Each time, Beauty gave the same answer. But she grew to like him, for he was always kind and gentle. Then one day, Beauty wished again to see her father. She looked at the mirror and she saw that he was lying in bed. She knew he was sick. That evening at supper, she asked the beast to let her visit her father. He's sick, she said. I would like to go to him. You may go, the beast said, but you must come back in a month. I will come back in a month, Beauty promised. Then tonight, turn the ring on your finger 3 times, the beast said. Tomorrow you will be there. When you are ready to return, turn the ring 3 times again. That night, Beauty turned the ring on her finger 3 times. When she woke, she was in her father's house. Her father was so glad to see her that he soon began to get well. Days went by very fast. The months soon passed. Beauty did not want to go back to the castle of the beast. One more day and I will return, she said to herself, day after day. One night she had a dream. She thought she saw the beast lying in the garden. She thought he was nearly dead. She awoke in tears. She quickly turned her ring 3 times and went back to sleep. In the morning, she was back at the castle. She ran quickly to the garden and found the beast lying just as she had seen him in her dream. She got water and washed his face. At last he opened his eyes. You forgot your promise, he said. I cannot live without you. Now I can at least die happy, for I have seen you again. No, no, cried Beauty. You must not die. You must live. I know now that I love you. I will be your wife. Yeah. At these words, the beast's eyes sparkled. Music filled the air, and Beauty turned to see where it came from. When she looked back, the beast was gone, and a tall, handsome prince stood before her. Where is my beast? Beauty asked. I was the beast, the prince said. A witch put me under a spell. I had to live as a beast until some good and beautiful maiden would promise to be my wife. Beauty was so happy that tears came to her eyes. The prince took her in his arms and carried her into the castle. Do not cry, he said. We shall never again have a reason to be unhappy. Yeah, that's how stories go, right? Next story. The Little Tin Soldier. There were once 25 tin soldiers. They were brothers. They had all been born in one old tin spoon. They carried their guns and looked straight before them. Their pants were red and their jackets were blue. The 10 soldiers were very, very splendid. The first words they heard were, 10 soldiers! These words were said by a little boy who took the lid off the box. The little boy clapped his hands when he saw the little 10 soldiers. They had been given to him for his birthday. He put them upon the table. All the soldiers were just alike, but the one that had been made last of all had only one leg. There had not been enough 10 to make 2 legs for him. He stood just as well on his one leg as the others did on 2. It is this soldier with only one leg that our story is about. On the table where the 10 soldiers had been placed were many other toys. The best toy was a little house. The little house was made of heavy paper. Though the windows one could see straight into the hall. Before the house were some little trees and flowers. There was a glass lake. All of this was very pretty. Best of all was the little lady who stood at the open door. She too was made of paper. She had a beautiful shiny dress. Around her she wore a little blue ribbon. On this ribbon there was a lovely rose. The rose was as large as a little lady's face. The little lady stretched out both of her arms. She was a dancer. She held one leg so high that the 10th soldier could not see it. He thought that she too only had one leg. That would be the wife for me, he thought. But she is very grand. She lives in a beautiful house. I have only a box, and there are 5 and 20 of us in that. There is no place for her. But I must get to know her. She is beautiful. Then the little 10 soldier lay down behind the box on the table. There he could watch the lovely little dancer. She still stood on one leg. When night came, all the other 10 soldiers were put into the box. Now the people in the house went to bed. Now the toys began to play. The 10 soldiers rattled the lid of their box. They wanted to get out, but they could not open the box. The jumping jacks jumped around, up and down. The ball bounced on the floor. The music box played it too. The toy cat ran after the toy mouse. And that little dog toy barked. There was so much noise that the little 10 soldier was afraid the people would wake up. The only 2 that did not move from their places were the 10 soldier and the dancing lady. She stood tall on her little toes and held out both arms. The 10 soldier lay very quiet behind the box on the table. He looked right at the dancing lady. He never turned his eyes away from her. Now the clock said 12 o'clock. The little lid flew off the black box, and up jumped a little old man. 10 soldiers, said the little old man. It's not nice to stare at people. The little 10 soldier would not listen. Just you wait until tomorrow, said the little old man. Morning came, and the children got up. The 10 soldier was sat in the window. All at once the window flew open, and the little soldier fell out, head over heels. He fell right out of the upstairs window to the hard ground below. Maybe the wind blew the window open. Maybe it was a little old man. The nursemaid and the little boy came down to look for him. They nearly stepped on him, and yet did not see him. The 10 soldier could have cried out, "Here I am," but then they would have found him. But 10 soldier did not think it would be brave to cry out, even to make someone find him. He said not a word. Suddenly, it began to rain. At first, the rain came down in small drops. Then it began to rain hard. Poor tin soldier lay there and let the rain beat against him. Then he began to move out into the street with the water. When the rain stopped, some boys came by. "Just look," said one of them. "There lies a tin soldier. He must come out and ride in a boat." The boys made a boat out of paper and put Tin Soldier in it. He sailed down the streets, and the boys ran beside him, clapping their hands. The water ran fast down the street, and the boat sailed fast with the water. It had been a hard rain, and the water raced down the streets. The paper boat rocked up and down, sometimes turned around so quickly that Tin Soldier thought the boat would upset. But he looked straight ahead and held his gun. All at once the boat went into a long tunnel. It became as dark as it was in its box. "Where am I going now?" he thought. "Oh, this must be that little old man's fault. Oh, if Dancing Lady only sat here in the boat with me, I would not care how dark it got." Suddenly there came a great water rat who lived in the tunnel. "What are you doing here?" asked the rat. Tin Soldier kept still and only held his gun tighter. The boat went on by, but the rat came after it. He showed his teeth and called out the bits of straw and wood. "Stop him! Stop him!" But the stream became stronger and stronger. Tin Soldier could now see the bright daylight. He heard the roaring noise and saw that the water ran into a great river. He was so near it that he could not stop. Another would have been frightened. The Tin Soldier did not have so much as move an eyelid. The boat went round and round, filled with water. It was going down. The Tin Soldier stood up to his neck in water. The boat went down deeper and deeper. The water went over the soldier's head. Then he thought of the pretty little dancer. He thought he should never see her again. Suddenly the paper boat came apart, and the Tin Soldier fell out. At that moment he was snapped up by a great fish. Oh, how dark it was in the body of that fish! It was darker than it had been in the tunnel. The little Tin Soldier just lay still and held his gun. The fish swam and swam around, and after a long time he became quite still. At last something stuck into the fish. The Tin Soldier saw light and heard a voice say, "The Tin Soldier!" The fish had been caught in markets and carried there. It had been bought and taken to the kitchen. A cook had cut him open with a big knife. She took hold of the Tin Soldier when he found him and carried him into another room. There she placed him on a table. The Tin Soldier was filled with joy. He was in the very room where he had been before. He saw the same children. The same toys stood upon the table. There was a pretty little house with a beautiful little dancer. She was still standing on one leg. She held the other high in the air. The Tin Soldier could hardly keep his tears back. Dancing Lady had waited for him. He looked at her, but they said nothing to each other. Then one of the little boys took Tin Soldier and threw him into the stove. The boy did not know why he did it. It must have been the fault of the little old man. Tin Soldier stood in the stove and felt a heat that was terrible. He did not know if the heat came from the fire or from his love for the Dancing Lady. He looked at the little lady. She looked at him. He felt that he was melting, but he stood still and held his gun. Suddenly the door flew open, and the wind caught up the dancer. She flew into the stove to Tin Soldier. She flashed up in flame until she was gone. Tin Soldier melted down into a lump. When the maid took out the ashes the next day, she found him. He had melted into the shape of the little tan hearts, but of the dancing lady there was nothing left but the rose and the ribbon that she wore, and that was burned as black as coal. So, okay, they died together. I guess that's uh, heartwarming. That's kind of a good story. That was pretty dark. We should retitle the screen. That was kind of a dark fairy tale. My eyes are so freaking blurry I can't read the screen. What is it? 10:13. Okay. What is it? What is it? Our next story, The Goose-Girl. There was once an old queen whose husband had been dead for many years. She had one child, a beautiful daughter. When the little princess grew up, she was to marry a prince who lived a great distance. When the time came for her to marry, she had to journey to a far kingdom. The old queen packed for us much gold, silver, and jewels, fine clothes of silk and velvets, for she loved her child with all her heart. She also sent her maid, who was to ride with the princess and hand her over to the prince. Each had a horse for the journey. The horse of the queen's daughter was to ride was called Swallow. The horse could speak. Right then. When the hour of parting came, the queen mother went into her room. She took a small knife and cut her finger. Then she held a white handkerchief there until there were 3 red spots on it. She gave this handkerchief to her daughter, saying, "Dear child, keep this. Take care of it. It will help you on your way." Then the princess sadly told her mother goodbye. She put the handkerchief into the neck of her dress. She got on her horse and went away to her prince. After she had gone a mile or two and felt thirsty, "Take my cup with you, which you have brought with you," she said to the servant girl. "Give me some water from the stream. I should like to drink." "If you are thirsty," replied the maid, "get off your horse and lie down and drink from the stream yourself. I don't choose to be your servant." So, in her great thirst, the princess got off her horse and bent down over the water and drank. She was not allowed to drink from the cup made of gold that the maid carried. "Oh me," said the princess. "If your mother knew this, her heart would break," answered the handkerchief. The princess said nothing. She got on her horse and rode on. The day was warm, and the sun burned her. She grew thirsty again. When they came to a stream of water, she again cried to her maid, "Give me some water in my golden cup." For she had long ago forgotten the girl's hard words. But the maid said more roughly, "If you wish to get a drink, drink as you can. I don't choose to be your maid." Then, in her great thirst, the queen's daughter got off her horse. She bent over the running stream and cried, "Oh me." The handkerchief again cried, "If your mother knew this, her heart would break." As she was drinking, leaning over the stream, the handkerchief fell out of her dress, and it floated away. The princess did not notice it, so great was her trouble. The maid, however, had seen it. She was happy to think that now she could do anything she liked. Since the handkerchief was lost, the princess could do nothing. When the princess again wanted to get on Swallow, the maid said, "I will ride Swallow. Here, you take my horse." And the princess had to do as she was told. Then the maid, with many hard words, made the princess change her lovely clothes for the maid's old ones. She also made her promise that she would not say one word of this to anyone at the court. If she had not promised, she would have been killed by the maid. Swallow, the horse, saw all this, but said not a word. The maid got on Swallow, and the princess got on the bad horse. They traveled on this way until they came to the palace. There was great joy overcome. The prince jumped forward to meet her. He lifted the maid from her horse, thinking she was a princess. She was taken into the palace, and the real princess was left outside. The old king looked out the window and saw the princess standing in the yard. He saw how young and beautiful she was. He went at once to the maid who was to marry his son. He asked about the girl who was left standing down below in the yard. The maid answered, I picked her up here along the way. Give her something to do. She may be busy. But the king had no work for her. I have a little boy who looks after the geese, he said. She may help him. The boy was named Carl. Carl! The princess had to help him look after the geese. After a time, the prince and the maid were married. Soon the maid, married, said to the prince, Dear husband, I beg you to do something for me. I will do anything, he replied. Then have one of your servants cut off the head of the horse I rode here. He does not obey me on the way. Really, she was afraid that the horse might tell what she did to the queen's daughter. She got the prince to promise that the horse should die. This came to the ears of the real princess, and she promised to pay a servant a piece of gold if he would do something for her. There was a great, dark-looking gate in town. Through this gate she had to pass with the geese each morning and evening. She asked the servants to nail up Swallow's head on it, so that she might see him again more than once. The servant did as he promised. He cut off the head and nailed it to the gates, as one does. Early in the morning, when Carl drove the flocks out of the gates, she said, Swallow, swallow, hanging there. Then the head answered, Oh, young queen, how poor you do. If this your tender mother knew, her heart would surely break in two. Carl and the princess drove their geese out to the country. When they had come to the meadow, the princess sat down, took down her lovely long hair. Her hair was like gold. Carl saw it and was delighted in its beauty. He wanted to pull out a few hairs, because that's what you do. The princess said, Blow, blow, O gentle wind, I say. Blow Carl's little hat away, and make him chase it here and there, till I have combed out all my hair. And have it pinned up again. There came such a strong wind that it blew Carl's hat far away across the meadow, and he had to run after it. When he came back, she had finished combing her hair, and she had pinned it up again. He could not get any of it, and he was angry. He would not speak to her. Until evening, they watched the geese without talking. Then they came home. The next day, when they were out driving the geese out of the gate, the maiden said, Swallow, swallow, hanging there. Swallow answered, Oh, young queen, how poor you do. If this your tender mother knew, her heart would surely break in two. They went on through the gate and up the road with their geese. When they reached the meadow, the princess sat down again in the field. She began to comb out her hair. Carl ran and tried to get it, and she quickly said, Blow, blow, gentle wind, I say, blow Carl's little hat away, Make him chase it here and there till I have combed out all my hair and pinned it up again. The wind blew and blew and blew Carl's little hat off his head. Carl had to run far away over the meadow to get it. When he came back, her hair had been put up a long time, and he could not get to any of it. And so they looked after the geese till evening came. After they had gone home, Carl went to the king and said, I won't watch the geese any more with that girl. Why not? Asked the king. Because she makes me angry. The king asked the boy to tell him what it was that she did to him. Carl said, In the morning when we pass the dark gate with the flock, there's an old horse's head nailed to the gate, and she says, Swallow, swallow, hanging there. And the head answers, Oh, young queen, how poor you do. If this is your tender madam, your mother knew, her heart would surely break in two. Carl went on to tell what happened in the goose pasture and how he had to chase his hat. The king told him to drive his flock out again the next day. As soon as morning came, the king hid himself behind a bush near the gate. He heard how the princess spoke to the head of Swallow and how the horse answered her. Then he went to the country and hid himself in the meadow. There he soon saw with his own eyes Goose-Girl entered and the goose boy bringing their flocks. After a while, he saw the girl sit down and take her hair down, which shone in the sun like gold. He heard her say, Blow, blow, a gentle wind, I say, blow Carl's little hat away, and make him chase it here and there, till I have combed out all my hair and pinned it up again. Then the wind came and carried off Carl's hat, so that he had to run far over the man. So the men did her hair. All of this the king saw. The king quietly left, unseen by the others, and returned to town. When the Goose-Girl came back that evening, he called to her. He asked her why she did all those things. I may not tell you that. I may not tell my troubles to anyone, she replied. I have promised not to say a word. If I had not promised, I should have lost my life. The king begged her to tell him, but she would not. Then he said, If you will not tell me your troubles, tell them to that old stove over there. And then he went away. The princess crept towards the old stove and began to talk and cry. Here I am, she said, alone in the world, and yet I am my queen's daughter. My maid has brought me to this very poor pass. She made me change clothes with her. She's taken my place with my prince, and I have become a servant to drive the geese. If my mother knew, her heart would break. The king was standing outside by the pipe of the stove and was listening to what she said. When the king heard, he stepped inside the room and asked her to come out of the stove. Lovely clothes were given to her, and it was wonderfully beautiful that she was. The king called his son and said, My son, you have married the wrong girl. Your wife is only the maid. Here is the true princess. The one that we have made a Goose-Girl is the real princess. See how beautiful she is? The young prince had joy in his heart when he saw how young and beautiful the real princess was. A great feast was made ready. Many, many people were invited. At the head of the table sat the prince, with the true princess at one side of him and the maid on the other. The maid did not know the princess in all of her splendid new clothes. When they had eaten and drunk and were very merry, the old king said he had a story to tell. Then he told the story of how the real princess had been treated. He turned to the maid and asked her what should be done to a person who would treat one the way the princess had been treated. The maid, thinking this was only a riddle, answered, She should be put into a barrel through which hundreds of nails have been driven. 2 white horses should be hitched to the barrel, and it should be dragged up one street and down another till the wicked person is dead. You have told how to punish such a low servant, said the king. Now you shall be punished just that way, for you are the wicked one. Then the true prince married the true princess, and they were very happy. Oh, Cubs, if someone asks you how someone should be punished, think mercifully, not stick them into a barrel full of nails and drag them up and down the road. I mean, obviously, that's just cruel. Admittedly, well observed, but got half an hour left. I will get through public source. I did get some more books for when I finished the ones I'm reading now. So, excuse me. So here's a explanation one apparently. Why the sea is salt. In a faraway land, there once lived 2 brothers. They were named Gus and Hans. Gus was rich, and Hans was poor. On Christmas Eve, Hans had no food. His wife was hungry. His little son was hungry too. They went to see Gus. I need something to eat, he said. My wife is hungry, my little son is hungry, and I am hungry too. Please let me have something to eat. Gus was angry. You should not come here, he said. You should not beg. Here's some honey. Do not come near me again. That sounds like my cousin. Hans took the honey and started home. As he went along, he met a funny little dwarf, because that's what one does. Good afternoon, the dwarf said. Where are you going with that honey? How did you know what I have, Hans asked. I know many things. Where are you going? Then you know where I'm going. Right you are, said the dwarf. You are a very smart man. I have something to tell you. Do you see that path? Yes, I see that. Well, you must take that path. It will lead you to a fairy house. When you go in, you will see many fairies. The fairies will want your honey. Let them have it. Then ask for the old mill. They will give it to you. What can I do with the mill? Hans asked. You can make it turn, the dwarf said. You will turn out anything you say. You must lay it on its side to make it stop. Take care to stop it. And the dwarf was gone. Hans did not know what to do. He did not want to lose his honey. He looked at the path. Well, the dwarf said to take that path, he thought. I'll take it and see what happens. I'll see if the dwarf was right. He went along the path, and soon he came to the fairy house. When he went in, he saw many fairies. We want your honey, the fairies cried. It was just as the dwarf had said. Maybe the dwarf was right about the mill, too. Very well. You may have it, Hans said. After a while, he asked, May I have the old mill? Yes, the fairy said. It's behind the door. You can take it home with you. Hans took the mill and went home. He met his wife at the door. What is that? She asked. A mill, Hans said. A fine mill. I'm hungry, his wife cried. I do not want to eat a mill. I want something to eat. But this is a fine mill, Hans told her. I will turn out anything I say. You shall see. Then he put the mill on the table. Turn out bread, he said. Turn, mill, turn. The mill turned out a nice brown bread. The mill turned. Then Hans made the mill turn out chicken, pie, and milk. Then he made it turn out cake and ice cream. What a wonderful mill, his wife cried. Now we can have food. On Christmas Day, Hans went again to see Gus. He asked Gus to have dinner with him. How is this? Gus asked. I thought you had nothing to eat. Now you ask me to dinner? I have food now, Hans said. Gus went to Hans' house. He wanted to see what they had to eat. They had a good dinner, but Hans did not tell anything about the mill. The next day, Gus hid in his brother's house. He wanted to see where Hans got his food. Hans told the mill to turn out chicken. Gus saw the mill work. Good, Gus said. Now I know how Hans gets his food. I want that mill. I will get it. I will get it when they are all gone. And he went home. The next day, Gus went back to Hans' house. Nobody was there. He went in and took the mill. He carried it home and showed it to his wife. Now we shall be rich indeed, he said. Gus had many ships, bought salt and sold it. That is how he made his money.